Hey, and welcome to the Neurodivergent Musician Podcast, where I explore the world of neurodiversity and musicianship. I'm your host, John Hart, and today I will be joined by Sarah Jay Hawley, who is a singer-songwriter, session singer, performance coach, vocal coach, and author. She's collaborated with the likes of Charles Webster, Tony Christie, and she featured on Massive Attack's double platinum album, Mezzanine. This episode is about bullying within the music industry and neurodiversity, but we do dive into other things like every guest episode. So let's dive into that conversation. Hey Sarah, how you doing?
I'm really good, thanks, John. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
No, you're welcome. It's we met a few months ago at Nick Bettini and Bloom DeWild's Creative Recharge, tell us more about yourself.
It was lovely to meet you there, and also the really mind-expanding, mind-blowing experience that was. I met some amazing people there, and I'm going to actually start in the present, because there's this idea that we, as musicians, we know we're only as good as our last performance, our last piece of work, and especially a neurodivergent musician, I'm only ever here and now, and people try and drag me back to some point in the past, whether it was last Saturday or 1972, it still feels like fucking ancient history, and it takes me ages to get there, And there's this interesting process of how we convolute stories and narratives about the past. And people ask me about my experience with Massive Attack, which was an amazing and devastating experience on lots of different levels. And depends on the angle of the narrative and the listener, depends on how I tell and frame that story. And as my identity shifts around the story, because the past is only ever a story, it changes, the narrative changes. So it's an ever-changing experience, that experience of high-end music business, female musician. And obviously, as you get older and brought up kids, and the experience of that, and the widening circle of viewing points, all the different viewing points that, the crown of eyes, I call it, that as an ADHD person, they're often all wide awake all at the same time, which is fucking exhausting. So learning to quieten some of those, you can rest now, this bit, or whichever bit of the brain it is. I'm learning more about that at the moment. So yes, I'm a singer-songwriter and vocal coach, and taught yoga for years and mindfulness, always mind the field of mind. It's been a fascinating subject. Really, that's been the singular train, if you like, that I've been on for my entire life. I remember as a kid, I said I wanted to be a psychiatrist when I grew up. I had no idea what that meant, other than there was some exploration of mind, who, how, and what we are, and how it all works. It's the fascination. And music is the most beautiful place to dance with that conversation, inner and outer, because it is just fucking cosmic and unendable. There is no limit. It's limitless. It's a limitless conversation with music, which is why I love it so much. So yeah, that's kind of, I'll stop talking now.
But no, I think there's something in that. And how do you feel when you're talking about, because I sort of see the eyes as like a kaleidoscope. So most people can see it through like one telescope and one spotlight during their day. And like you were saying, kind of all the eyes are wide open. But I see, like, I'm looking at a kaleidoscope and there's just a million possibilities all the time. But then do you find sometimes you're fluctuating between, it can be subconscious as well, between present and past, and it's just all floating around all at once?
Yeah, and I do believe the time-space continuum, depending on your viewing point, is all floating around all at once, and where we position ourselves on that perception is everything. There is no fixed point of reality. And it is pretty cosmic, time-traveling experience, having an ADHD brain, and it's wonderful until you're in a straight line system with people who aren't in that universe with you, and then it's really difficult, really challenging, exhausting, and shame. You feel the shame of it, and the conversation we were going to have today, because something that's really come up for me is around bullying. Conversation I'm having with my coach at the moment, Tristan Hunt, who you put me in touch with. So thank you for that.
Amazing.
This came up, and I'd never seen the situations that I've been in, because I sort of, I refuse to be a victim. However, which has made me not really see clearly this aspect of bullying, which is present in my life, working on removing that. And I just don't see it. And I think a lot of neurodivergent people don't see it. It's like there's a sort of sneaking in, because people see what we don't see. And then they find a way to manipulate that for themselves in some way. And the music business is, what's the Hunter S. Thompson phrase? You know, the good side is that the alleyways are filled with pimps and thieves. And that's the good side of the music business. So, you know, that, and then add that, what I've just talked about, bullying. So a lot of my experience in the music business, there was sexual assault, there was ripped off financially, I was left hanging, I was left out of collecting, the right royalty splits. And I'm sure it's not just neurodivergent musicians who that happens to. But do you know what? Somebody might slap my wrist for saying this. I don't think I've met a musician who isn't neurodivergent. And the more successful they are, the more neurodivergent they are, in my experience. And I'm not going to go near the word sane or normal or any of those things, because that balance point is irrelevant to me.
I do feel for years, the tendency of a lot of musicians to mask with drink and drugs.
Oh yeah,
can mask what could be co-conditions like depression and anxiety, but those are co-conditions of possible neurodivergent conditions and stuff. So there's like you've got to get through somehow. And obviously back in the day, and maybe today not so prevalent. I mean, there's a lot of musicians now, maybe, I know session musicians who don't turn up and drink as much and stuff anymore, but you've then got to live in a raw state, completely raw state. And in that raw state as well, like you're saying, there's a vulnerability, constant vulnerability, where if you're not this other person, if you haven't got something else to be able to kind of just to be able to connect with people, drink when we're drunk or whatever it is, then people, you can get exploited. And then obviously then there's the stigma, and then there's the ableism and all the other things that get included. But like you're saying there with bullying, there's blind spots that we can't see, and then obviously people can exploit them. I haven't been as deep into the music industry, because I was just like, do you know what, I didn't want to go and get a record deal. So I was just like, right, okay, I'll be an independent musician. I was in bands, I was in sort of those sort of circles as such, on tours and things. But as I went out as a solo musician, I kind of went more niche and started to sort of drive away from it. It felt like a country boy going into the city. I started to see the city. I started to see the smoke as I got closer, like the Mordor, Lord of the Rings, whatever you want to call it. I was like, oh, hang on a minute. No, I don't want to, get any closer. But for yourself, it sounds like you were right in it. You were right in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that's just, you're having to play this game in a way where you're like, I have to, I'm a musician. This is is this it? Is this part of it, sort of thing. And
yeah,
made it in some ways and stuff, but there's this real dark side that you're constantly seeing. I imagine you're like vigilant and just like, what's gonna come next. And and yeah, I can imagine probably reflecting back on now. And when did you find out you with the ADHD? And
I had a stroke 7 years ago. I mean,
right.
Talk about the end of burnout. I mean, I've had burnout experiences, and I've mapped my burnout pattern now, having gone back and explored my life pattern and mapping of peak fucking trough, peak trough. It's like it's a complete
Yeah.
It's not like this nice wavy life. It looks like this. Let's not do that anymore. Yeah, I'm sure you feel me with that.
We're not like we dip 20%, 20%. It's just like 80, 80, 80, whatever it is and stuff. So yeah, I completely. And I mean, going through that process, I mean, did that feel like there was I was told that the term grief and relief, which is like relief, there was like this mix of did you get grief during like
Yeah.
going back through that, but did you get relief knowing that there was you could connect the dots of what was going back then as well? Because
Yeah.
it's such a weird experience because it's well, no, I'll allow you. I'll allow you to elaborate.
I'm sure it's a shared experience. I mean, it opened up a whole new hall of mirrors of the way the world reflects back me at me and me, perception and reflection. That's all life is, and you choose the mirrors who you know the way we walk through life, or we don't, or we fall through life blinkered and we don't choose them. I had the experience of having the stroke, being bedbound pretty much for 2 years. However, my internal state of being got more fizzy, more manic. My brain, fireworks brain, didn't stop. Couldn't, none of the coping strategies that I'd put in place up to that point, which I called my life. It turned out my entire life was a fucking bunch of coping strategies, running from one place, one city to another, from one party to another, one gig to another. Just quite, I look back on it now and think, fuck me, it's a life of 5 people I was living. How the hell? It was inevitable that I was going to land burnout, and I'm glad I survived. So glad I survived. But amidst that, there was a what the fuck is wrong with me moment, and the wonderful Alexa, eavesdropping, started sending me Attitude magazine.
Right. Yeah.
I was having conversations. The conversations were happening around me with people, and there was obviously some picked up there. I do like the robots for that eavesdropping when they're useful. So that came in, and Attitude magazine sent me an article on creativity and neurodivergence. And it was a moment of, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then a whole year of, oh my God. Oh my God. Therapy, counseling, more reading, and a whole new library of books, a whole new deep dive of research, a whole new conversation with loads of people suddenly popping up everywhere that me too, me too, me too. And me spotting it in lots of people that hadn't considered it. And women, for me, it was especially in women, mothers who mask anyway, get through an awful, women mask anyway an awful lot. So, which is why women are harder to diagnose.
Well, the generic, energized bunny boy or whatever it is, like it's the tendency of like that is when you mention ADHD to someone, it's just like, oh, if you don't have that characteristic, that one characteristic that is the hyper side of it, then you can't, you can't have it, so even if you're a daydreamer in the classroom or whatever it is. And I think, reading up a lot about women who have late diagnosis and not being able to get picked up on because of this particular this one trait, just means that you just kind of have to suck it up and just kind of get on with it and on. And now, and which is beautiful now, because if you're starting to recognize in others, and when you do go and see someone and you kind of the stigma or the ableism and that others have had for years, and it's still prevalent, obviously, and you can see in press, it's just like, oh, there's this over diagnosis and people getting tested, and I'm like, well, I think it was Ellie Middleton, she brought out a book called Unmasked. She called it the lost generation, where for decades you haven't known, you've just kind of been surviving basically, and now you've found out, and like you've just said, it probably sounds familiar, it's become my special interest. Music was my special interest for probably 2 decades, and it still is, it's still in my heart. This is why I created this podcast and other things. Having a creative head, we're like, well, I don't want to keep it in here, I want to I need to use it somehow. I need
Yeah,
to spread it. And it sounds like we're doing the same sort of
yeah,
things. And it's just like, this is obviously a bit niche. It's neurodivergent musicians, but it's just like, well, I can only talk about what we can talk about. But how have you, well, I suppose connecting with your music and your music career now, but since getting your sort of diagnosis and things as well and finding out, has that shifted, or or if you found that you've unlocked yourself a little bit more, so it means your creativity's increased or it's changed in a way? Or it's a
yeah.
bit of an open question.
No, I get it. I
An open
get it.
question.
Like you, it has changed. And when I found yoga when I was in my 20s, and like discovering ADHD and psychology around it, because it lit me up. I was so fascinated by the practice of yoga, and meditation helped me live my life and find my sense of purpose and belonging and feeling connected to people, because that's one of the saddest things about ADHD. There's this liminality, always on the outside, never quite knowing how to really join in or really belong, and I always felt on the back foot of a conversation. So you become the class clown. I'm really funny, and I learned to be really fucking funny because it was a good way to get the attention. Maybe, who knows, looking back, maybe that was why I drove myself to the headline big stages. And it was like being seen. We all have a need to be seen, not just looked at. And there was something in the music business which, as a woman, especially in the 90s, they were more interested in what I looked like and how I could be looked at, rather than my deep desire to be seen. And that conflict, it just became too difficult for me to walk that line. And as conversation I have with a lot of female musicians, with the imbalance there of, the perception, the shallow perception of women in the music, how you are supposed to look and present as opposed to men, that's a completely massive conversation. And
Yeah.
that's bullying. That's, if you don't look like this in Massive Attack, headlining, whatever, superstar stages, all the guys were allowed to wear their Adidas trainers, Levi's, and fucking Kangol hats, which is what I look like most of the time. I wasn't allowed to go on stage like that. I had to get the dress out and the thong and the fucking heels and all that bollocks, which I hated. That wasn't me at all. I'm rampant tomboy, always have been. So it was really difficult and that was the masking of that and the conflict around that and the arguments and the conversations around that became quite a challenge, quite a challenging time. Anyway, so that's a sort of patriarchal bullying, if you like, within certain industries, a music business being one, modeling industry being another. I'm sure there are some where there's a really big spotlight on what you look like rather than how talented you are, or
Mm.
how, brilliant you are at a thing. Is that perception? It's pervasive. I'm sure it's everywhere. However, music business, big one, really big one. Bigger conversations to be had around that. And yes, the ADHD thing, I qualified as a yoga instructor through the Yoga for Health Foundation when I discovered how wonderful a tool it was to help me stay sane and grounded and feel connected to myself and the cosmos, which is one of the ADHD superpowers, is the ability to dance in the cosmos and that lovely freedom and expansive brain capacity that we have, where you feel like a star, and I mean a literal star, sparkling at its best. That's how we can feel, which brings that lovely feeling of optimism and resilience and connectedness in that expansive big picture. However, cloistered, mirrored by, this lost feeling, feel more lost in a room full of people than in a field on my own. It's that feeling where for most people it's the other way around. No, it's so, and that's lonely. There's a loneliness that comes with that as well that is really gets difficult to manage. Also.
It sounds like there's two processes of square peg and round hole in regards to, like, the way you had to be in the music industry, but also the way you were autonomy, like just authentically and things as well. It's just like, the music industry was not set up for neurodivergent brain to be in there and to be this at the same time. It's like it's two completely different identities. Like I'm having to completely shift exactly who I am as a character internally and externally to just fit in with this climate and atmosphere. And there's like obviously you get the adrenaline rush and you get all the, you know, all the other stuff that goes with it, with festivals and those crowds and stuff as well. But how it's, I mean, we kind of alluded to it in the creative recharge of like, we only have so much energy in that little bottle that we can store up, a dopamine energy or whatever it is. So you can get that crowd. And my wife used to say like self-sabotage, or I've just released an album. She's just like, but the next day she's like, what the hell? Like, what you just won this award and stuff as well. Why have you crashed? Like, because
Yeah.
it it's like it does not live very long in the like it's a dopamine rush. But for me, I don't know if you can relate, but all of those amazing little milestones were
Yeah.
surrounded by so much negative, and this is internal negative, like maybe self-hatred or whatever it is that I was creating for myself.
Yeah.
And so for every little amazing little achievement I've had in my career, it's like got 5 negative things around it. And our brains will ruminate on the negativities, and then it's really difficult to pull yourself out of that. And that's why you say sometimes we're in these circles. I thought at one point when we was going through this kind of identity crisis or whatever it was, figuring out with ADHD, because I thought, oh right, ADHD here, autism here, and my authentic self here, and I felt like they were 3 completely different people, and trying to synergize that, because it's one of those I went back through my whole career, or my whole life, again situations of whatever it was that I felt like people would always pick up on my weaknesses. All the flaws would just explode all the time, and that then meant, oh, I was stupid, oh, I'm just an idiot, and everything's like the jester, constant sort of having to play that role all the time because it obviously made people laugh or whatever it was. But actually, I was just self-inflicting pain on myself all the time. And this just vicious cycle goes around. And I suppose now we've started to kind of open the gates with it. And there was, I mean, I imagine there still is bullying now in the industry, and there's I don't know if it's as prevalent as, you know, in the 90s it was saying. But how do you feel now, this all this awareness and education, and like us, we're not just keeping it to ourselves, or not just like lived experience, we're trying to like open these channels for people just to be able to talk and be vulnerable, because we could be introverted, we can class ourselves as introverted, but I feel we're introverted in neurotypical settings. As soon as we get into a neurodivergent cluster, we can't stop talking. We're and talking over each other, getting cut up, and we, you know, and if someone says sorry, we're like, no, you don't have to say sorry, this is just part of who we are. Like we had in the creative recharge, I think once we started to open the gates, we were like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm starting to, it's like I've got my slippers on, I'm starting to kind of get comfortable here. And I wonder if it's a bit like that. It's almost like the masks are starting to come off in those little situations that we've got. And we're not having to be these other personas, these other identities to fit into this neurotypical settings. And these conversations we're having now, even if we cut each other off, even if we've gone, I don't know where the fuck I've gone. Like, you know, that comes up all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We go off track, we go on our little side quests, whatever it is, and then we come back and we're like, doesn't matter. But to other people, it's so confusing for them. But my point is, I think in a modern music industry now, I'm wondering, from your point of view, now we've started opening the gates of this kind of, like you said, I reckon a lot of musicians. I mean, there's a harsh stat that 80% have mental health issues. I'm like, well, I think that's the surface stuff. I don't think that's what they've got. I think there's something underneath going on. So potentially 80% have neurodivergent
Yeah.
yeah. So if you imagine that and then open conversations about it, and I've been contacting like Musicians Union, they've just started up a neurodivergent hub, and PRS and help musicians. They're just starting to get the wheels turning. I'm like, we're at the beginning of a brand new cycle here.
Yeah.
What's my question? I've gone off, but I think, how do you feel about that now, and compared to the old industry to where we're heading?
I'm loving the openness of the conversations. However, the behaviours catching up with the openness of the conversations is a very different thing, because people need to want to change. And I'm going to be, I don't know, maybe this, I'm reticent to say this. I'm working in music industry. I teach at various different universities and music colleges and institutes. I also teach private one-to-one people, both male and female. I notice the thread and the vein of sexism and bullying that runs through all of those environments. I'm hyper focused on it, and I witness it daily. And even the conversation around it has changed, and the openness of discovering that. However, it's the conversation, for those that are willing to have it. And that's a brave conversation to have, because it requires vulnerability and support and a community of having the mirror of, I see you, I get it. You know, the conversation that we're having is that I get it. You don't have to apologize for going off on tangents. It's like going on a little train ride, magical mystery tour. What your external processing journey is gorgeous, and I'm just there for the ride. And then I can come right back to the point that we started discussing at any point in that. It's like, I don't get lost. I stay where I am, it's that lovely thing as well, which is what I'm doing it now. I'm noticing I'm doing it now, which is what being a front person on a stage is. Yeah. You're in hyper-focused, present moment, glorious beingness. And that's what makes it such a special brain to have, because it does make that possible. And it's the same thing for me with meditation and yoga experience and dancing and all those things that require absolute presence and Zen states of being. Once we pull all of, that stuff, that is one of the magical bits about having an ADHD brain, when allowed to settle in. And it's a settling into the middle of the cosmos, right into the center of the circle, right in the middle of all the crazy, and being able to witness everything that's buzzing around. And that's the feeling I get when I'm performing, when I'm in that moment and I take that breath in, and then it's just like plumb line to absolute present state. And the best performers, and I am a brilliant performer, and I've learned to say wonderful things about myself over the last few years, which feels so good. No self-effacing false humility. Fuck that. It's so tiresome and boring. I'm not doing that anymore. And I highly recommend. It's not a fake ego either. We have to know where we shine and be able to own it and talk about it, as well as know where we can, that balance of then, I'm great at that, not so good at that. So let's polish that a bit and let's really work on this. It's that within all of our human beingness of experience. I've written a memoir, which I wrote to help recover memory and brain damage from my stroke. I started writing not as a process of, I'm going to write a memoir, as a process of, oh, fuck, somebody's told me I'm never going to read again, so I need to prove them wrong, which that tenacity, brilliant ADHD, resilience, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me, that part of it. So you'll never read again. I've just written a book, 150,000 words, just took 5 years, but there was no that's not anyway. So that's the resilience is a really big part of what we have, because it's been built over years of finding a way in. Where's the gap? Where's the bit of me that will allow me to be who and how I am? It's gorgeous. There's not really a shrinking violet moment, and I've kind of gone off on a spiral and a bit lost myself now.
No, I think, especially when you talk about resilience, and when we were alluding to bullying and to climates and changing from, you know, in some ways, maybe the music industry or things as well. It's like it can be seasonal changes, it can be different things and stuff as well. And to be able to kind of keep going and have the longevity of it and things as well, and how much it changes, you know, and you can, like, some people can get stuck on the same wheel and they're there for years and years and years and years doing the same things. You know, I've got friends who've worked like for Disney and they're doing 0 hours wherever it is and stuff, and they're doing the same role for years and years and years, and they're not changing where they are because there is a obviously they're fixed in where they are, and they which can be resilience. But I think there's another type of resilience where we have to adapt, we have to be flexible as much as possible. Yet, like you're saying, we can, the past, and I'm learning this a lot, where, you know, the past used to just be swamped around me all the time, like hanging around like another, just this other character next to me. And now going, do you know what? The past does not define me. The part and all those things. When did you get to a point where you were able to, or I don't know, does it fluctuate, where it's not become emotional, it becomes objective with the past, with things? Could you see the bullying and everything as well objectively, or are you still, I mean, I know we're still working through things and stuff,
Yeah.
or do you feel like it can be objective but then can go very quickly into emotional, and you're there? Because our brains can obviously take, it's like a film, isn't it? We can
Yeah.
go, I'm just going to watch the trailer of what this thing, you know, happened and stuff. Before we know it, we're immersed in the bloody film. But it's like, how do you like step back and go, this is just a film running? I don't know
Think
if it's a question there, but I think
blind
there's a,
spots. I think those blind spots are still happening. I've had an incident in the last couple of months where that was bullying, and where I was bullied. And I don't, like I say, it's been a new phase for me of seeing those things that happen where I don't know, something happens and I'm feeling charged, scared, unsafe because of the way that somebody has acted or spoken to me or behaved towards me. And that's bullying. And because I'm dancing around life feeling not normal and not having normal responses to things, then I've never seen that as bullying before. And it was only in conversation with Tristan when I was talking about particular incidents, and he went, you know, that's bullying. And then tracing back to another experience a few years ago with a male musician who started a fake hate Facebook page about me that shut me down for a couple of years. And I didn't see that as bullying. I saw that as sexism or verbal abuse or bullying. To me, there's an implication that somehow I'm a victim, and I don't like that word, or seeing myself as a victim. However, there's something in not seeing that really as it is that has meant it's perpetuated. And I haven't seen myself and my, if role is not the right, I don't know, my position in that dynamic, that thing that keeps happening. And there's this wake up call recently. If this has happened this number of times over the last few years, the one common denominator in all of those experiences is me. So what the fuck am I doing? That this co-creation is what aren't I seeing? Where aren't I vigilant? What's happening? You know, where's the boundary? Where's the gatekeeper not keeping the gate safe into this part of myself? And so that's been another, okay, let's look at it that way then. Let's own it. Being victimized isn't the same as being a victim. I have a real part of my autistic brain is around clarity in language and communication. Another reason why I'm a great writer, because it has to be really on point, really have a meaning, like really puncture something so that there's a value to the words. Because honestly, the mundanity of neurotypical blah, 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 it's like, oh my God, what the fuck is anybody saying right now? Just, or you know, or move on. Can we just move on? I've no interest what somebody that I don't know did 2 weeks last Saturday in a shop. What the fuck is anybody why is everybody talking about this? And I just sit there and go, yeah, porridge, yeah. Masking. I don't actually mask anymore these days. I'm just, you know, considered arrogant by a lot of people because I just walk away. It's like, I'm just going to rock here. I've wasted my life. I'm going by. And that's a much better way for me to live. So I've dropped a lot of the masks. I can't be arsed with it, John. And if they want to see me as rude and arrogant, fine. Or as the recharge people say, if they want to create me as that, then fine. And actually what's happening is I'm bored. It isn't working for me. I'm going that way. They're just some facts that has nothing actually to do with anything to do with them, you know. And that's quite a difficult thing to own. However, I'm owning it more. I'm just getting a little bit more warrior in that space of, yeah, I'm not people pleasing anymore because it's exhausting. It builds more layers on the false identities. It's more masking and actually create space. Less is more. Simplify, not complicate. Take things, you know, it's this, especially for an ADHD brain, it's a process of subtraction, not addition.
You're right. And even I had discussions with Tristan where I've stopped so many things. Like I don't listen or watch the news at all anymore. And that's a very communal thing. You've got to know what's going on. And I'm like, I don't look, as much as there's things going on in the world, I get it and things as well. But context is, if they were to dive into our past and dive into our brains of the experiences that we've gone through, why would I put myself into a pool of negativity that's going to flare up? It's going to flare up my mental health. It's not going to, I'm not going to be feel sad or like what everything as well. It's a precipice of sending me into a spiral. I'm like, so you're right. I'm going to avoid those situations that de-energize, that add negativity, because I have a really sensitive brain that can send me freaking downwards immediately. So you're right. Like I cut out the smallest of things this year, which was I don't send cards to people anymore for their birthdays and stuff as well. It kind of rubbed some people up the wrong way. But I'm like, there's a process where you buy a card, you get a stamp, you put it in the post, and then someone's going to throw it away after 2 days. I'm like, I'd rather just put it towards an e-voucher, whatever it is. It sounds very small, but it's one of those where you start to cut things out where you're like, it's taking up too much bandwidth of my head. Something that small for someone else is like, it's really easy for you, like breathing and walking and everything. For me, that takes a mental process that I'm like, and it sounds, I'm like, oh, John, are you being pedantic? And that we can get into that point, can't we? A simple task for someone else, I'm like, I'm saying it's difficult. I'm like, oh no, am I just being pedantic? I'm like, no, John, you're doing these things for a reason, just to be able to get a level playing field of life. So you're right. Those conversations that you have with other people, you know, and sometimes I walk in and I'm like, oh my days, I can feel myself starting to get drained immediately. I feel like something's getting sucked out of me, and I'm like,
Really?
you start going, there's a reason why we have so many toilet trips. It's not because you need the toilet, it's because you just need that space to be able to go, I just need to go get away from it. Until I meet another neurodivergent. And then it feels like, because I've been told I can monologue or I can jabber. And this is like close people to me who over the years said these things. And it's funny, as soon as we found out about the ADHD, they don't tell me that anymore. But I'm like, right, but you said these things until I had a label, or until whatever it was. And I can accept that you don't tell me I'm monologue or jabber anymore. But there is a sense that, right, okay, well, I'm not going to be as open to you about sort of certain things, because as much as you tell me I don't monologue, there's still subconsciously, you think I'm monologuing until I meet someone with ADHD. And there is a feeling where I've got a support worker, and I think we talked about, and he's neurodivergent as well. And I feel like we're on a conversation, we're talking about business, and neurotypicals could probably, I don't know, sum up this conversation within like 5 minutes. It takes us an hour to get to whatever the conversation is, because we've gone all around the houses. And I feel I need to have that conversation once a week with other neurodivergent, so I can have succinct, streamlined conversations with neurotypicals.
Yeah.
and if I don't, I get so wrapped up in myself.
Yeah.
It gets really I don't know, compounded inside.
Can I butt in here, John? Just to reflect something back. For me, art feeling feels like you're drowning in self, in something. The way that I used to put it was, it's like, if and it's external processing, which is essential for ADHD and autistic,
Mm,
which is why everything that the processing that normal typicals do in their brain before they say a thing, we
mm,
can't. We need a reflection back, and a body doubler or an
yeah.
external processing partner to receive whatever it is. I used to think, before I was diagnosed, it was like, I used to describe myself as a kite with no string, and like an
Right.
echoless chamber. Like it was just like this, things would happen and nothing would bounce back. So there'd be no reflection and no, like tennis, which I've just rediscovered and fucking love. God, neurodivergent dream tennis is. Anyway, it's another thing. Ping pong might suffice. There's this bounce, isn't there, when you're in this external processing or the body doubling. Often I'll send an email I don't need to send, and then the answer will come the second I press send,
Right.
because it's an external processing thing. And
Yeah.
I've only
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
realised that. So now I'll write the email, pretend to send, and then the answer will come. It's almost like I go into the request externally before I can dig the answer up internally. And that's a big realization for me recently, which is why support workers, body doublers, kind friends, being around other neurodivergents where you can have that nice bounce,
Mm.
absolutely essential. Otherwise, it is like drowning in, like, fuck me, fireworks and words and history, time compounding. It's massively overwhelming, to the point where you're just floored. To the point where I'm some days just sofa bound, can't do anything. Brain's going, and I'm
But it's
just going,
why also we're so sensitive to bullying in regard, like we are so, our ourselves are so sensitive in regards to people can just pick up and they can take advantage or whatever it is, because we're almost some ways such an open book constantly.
yeah,
That,
yeah,
and also it's like a Coke can. You shake this up inside, it's gonna fizz out, and you don't
yeah,
know what the fuck that's gonna come out.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm like, I can't rein it in, and unless it's someone who's completely understanding, just like, I don't know, they might go, I might call it a nice little name of, I mean, it could be verbal diarrhea and stuff, but that's still very
yeah,
like, oh no, but then they might get over me talking too much in a minute. I could ruminate about me talking too much in over 24 hours. I've done it when we've gone out to parties and I've drunk too much, and the shit that's coming out of my mouth.
yeah.
The next day, I'm like, oh
The
oh
sorrow, I
no,
know.
what the hell? And that also leads to, especially when I used to drink, because I gave up drinking in Feb, and I was like, it was not only for sleep and for mental health, but it's for the shit that used to that come out, but that I had no idea was coming out until the next day. Someone would be like, John, do you realize what you said last night? And it was like the deepest, darkest secret, whatever it is that you keep at bay, just flow out. I'd be like openly talking about money with my wife, and she'd be like kicking my shin over. And you can't. And I got this in the school playground all the way up until maybe the music industry and stuff as well. And I'd be like, just what do they call it? You kind of just shoot your mouth off or whatever it is and stuff,
Yeah,
or there's no filter between brain and mouth, and it just comes
yeah,
out. And I've kind of got it now. Now I'm, sober and teetotal, but the drinking thing, and then obviously the drugs or whatever it was.
yeah,
This is where, and you see a lot of musicians on stage now, like when they do have it, stuff where they're like frontmen, maybe what's happened with Tenacious D recently, or whatever it is, and stuff as well, that just like shooting stuff off of the mouth that's just kind of so intrusive, you don't realize sometimes what you're saying. And I've sort of found that has been, depending on the people where you're around, so susceptible to them people being able to go, okay, I can bully you, I can say things to you because you're being stupid, you're being idiotic by saying the stuff. And I think it's that open bookness. And then we went from open book, we then go to closed book, which we have, we close ourselves up.
Yeah.
But then we trap it in like a bloody dog on a lead, and you're just like, oh no, just keep it at bay, keep it at bay.
Yeah.
And then you get, then the depression and the anxiety kicks in, and then we're having to have meds to then control that, because we've had this misunderstanding and people misunderstood us for years
Yeah.
and years and years. And now, like, now we know what the hell's going on, to taking off the mask and kind of going, I felt like when I took off the mask, it was like this wrinkled kind of body or whatever, or like face and stuff that's been under a mask for like 20 years. And it's like you can breathe, but I'm like, oh fuck, I feel like I've got to try and walk again. I've got to try and talk again. I've got to be this, I want to be this open book again. And like you were alluding to, like, just say what I want to say, and not hold back, and be around the people I want to be around that doesn't de-energize. But yeah. And I think it's not linear. I mean, I can't, you know, I've only been in this for a couple of years and stuff, but the processing of it, and like just the understanding and the education of it, you know, it's probably the same with you. It's become a special interest where
Yeah.
I'm just like, this is non-stop now for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Obviously we're managing these things, but it's just that exploration and talking to other people about their different experiences. It can only be a good thing. Obviously there is articles, there's still massive amount of stigma and ableism and all this sort of other stuff that comes about with it. But I think talking about that, even if it's still happening, even if it's still bullying and everything as well, I think because if we openly talk about it, we just keep talking about it, because we never were able to do that back in the day. We're never able to call someone out on what they were doing, whatever it is and stuff. I don't know. I mean, I think we're still at the start of it.
Can I just interject there as well? There's something as well about masking, and especially in the industry and in life and business, around something I dance with a lot, around ego. How much of that then becomes false pride, false face, false grandiosity of which comes out as ego. And there's a different feeling and a different sound to someone who has, talking to Tris about this as well, who has a good ego balance, has a good relationship with the ego, and to someone that moves between grandiosity, grandizement, and I'm going to kill myself, I'm so shit, you know, which is a bipolar mental health thing. And there's something around that I resisted for years, because fundamentally, something in that, there's a learning difficulty. And I didn't want to be someone with a learning difficulties because I'm too clever and I went to grammar school and I did blah de fucking blah. However, I have a brain that has a learning difficulty. And the more honest I get with that, the easier it is for my ego to get out of the way, so that I can start admitting things. I can start unmasking, which means requesting things honestly and not getting in this, you know, this kind of pop star front facing the world that looks arrogant, that looks demanding, that looks cheeky, entitled, even, you know, whatever, all those words that can be attributed to that masking behavior. And moving that ego, sidestepping it, is just, it's just a little softer of, sorry, I didn't understand, or I didn't hear you, or can you, you know, asking, requesting, my needs are this, knowing what they are. So I'm going to have to leave now. It's too bright. It's too loud. I don't understand what the fuck's happening. So I'm going to leave now is much better than, oh, I'm just going to drink a whole bottle of wine in half an hour and smoke like a fucking idiot and sit with my legs crossed and giggle like a lunatic and pretend that I know what's going on and become the clown of the room, or sing loudly so everyone looks at me, and which is a total flip of the thing. It's like, don't look at me, but look at me. You know, I don't belong, so let me belong loudly, which is
it
part
feels like
of
you
creative
become
well.
I thought I'd become plastic. Like, you know, like I feel like there's the soft, like, you know, warm character, whatever it is, like that can do that. As soon as I go, okay, no, actually, no, I'm going to stay this, I'm going to see it out, and I'm going to, you know, be here, wherever it is and stuff. There's just this plastic hard shell, or whatever, it like just starts to take over. That it's like small talk, like, you know, that kind of like plastic conversations where I'm just like, this, no, you You know, it's like small talk at school, wherever it is. And I'm like, I want to get in and I want to get out because I can't have the surface stuff, wherever it is. And I feel that's why we need the drink and drugs to be able to go, okay, I just need something just to be able to get me through. And like, you know, this situation, I'm like, do I really need to have that to get in this, or do I just leave the situation? But that shift, like you said, it's like, it's not an ego. It's just like, that's self-care that we've not done for years and years and years. We've just been people pleasing to be able to fit for other people's,
Yeah.
you know, sales, wherever it is and stuff. I'll slot into your, you know, I'll be a square peg and slot into your round, the round holes, wherever it is and stuff as well. But it's just like, no, hang on a minute. What about me now? What about this situation now? You know, and I'm like, I now have to make a decision where I'm like, do I really want to go out and see all these people?
Yeah.
Or do I just want to stay in and watch this film, and just it's about recharging as well. We got so much battery, but that's awareness. That's complete awareness, isn't
Well,
it?
the other balance, which is another friend has taught me, or shall I just go to this place for half an hour?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Test.
then the
It's
half
like
an hour can then become an hour. But the initial thing
right.
is the black, it removes a bit more of the black and white. Another friend just says, when I'm stuck and frozen, just do the next 15 minutes, which is a lovely tool that I've taken on.
Okay,
You know,
great.
that when there's too many things to do, it's like, what does the next 15 minutes require? And that's often just putting the kettle on or tidying my desk or just something that isn't involved in machination and creating 10
Yeah, yeah,
people at the
yeah.
same time and working out, you know, this another lovely ADHD quality, and I'm going to call them all lovely. It's difficult, but lovely. I'm working through with Tris is this backlog of assets that I've got and created, and that last 20% undoable. I've written another book and recorded another album while 5 of them are sitting on the shelf of not being released and not being out in the world. So the next year or so of my life is learning that skill and that digging deeper into that awareness of, okay, so I'm big chat with Bloom about this, about how the underlying thing there is the process is the joy, it's the dopamine, it's the learning, it's where the wildness is. The being seen at the end of the process, that's a really difficult part of that release, that ownership of that process, that because that vulnerability in standing there going, yes, this is me, you know, to quote some musical theatre songs that are wonderful.
Yeah, yeah,
They are, that is wonderful, that
yeah,
song.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's, I'm really excited and terrified as to what that looks like. I've no idea. It's a whole other section of the cosmos that I've never played in. It's actually that owning that last 15-20%, being there going, this is me. This is my new book. This is all my music, my albums. Like it, don't like it, but at least it's out there in the world. I'm not putting, no, there's always been this, I don't just want to sling things out half-assed on Facebook for 6 people to watch either. So there is something in me that knows, yeah, there's some real worth here. I just need to learn to know how to own that feeling of fucking magnificence and brilliance that this feedback loop that I'm putting this out and let that come back in. There's a resistance to it coming back in somehow. Can't even quite put it into words just yet,
But
John.
you're aware that that is going on. There's also another thing of when you turn up to like you said, you go out for 30 minutes and you just have these social situations or whatever it is and stuff. I don't know if I tend to do this now before I step in. I'm like almost talking to myself, giving myself permission and going and checking in to go, is this place all right and stuff as well. And when you go and check like
Yeah.
all the lighting and the noise and the people and everything as well, rather than diving in, that would what I would, and then I'd be like, shit, I'm sinking here. Um, I've always been a reactive person, but now I was like, this since I found out about all this shit that's going on in my brain, there's this somewhat proactive side starting to slowly come into play where it's more of a checking in with yourself. And what you were talking about there with creativity, you know, I have a theory that like a lot of neurodivergents are like hard, I mean, particularly musicians and creatives, it's almost like hardwired 80% to be creative, and then you distribute the rest of 20% to the rest of your life, right? if we were given as human beings like 100 points, and you could spread it over 4 different areas like logic and emotions and everything, logic and creativity, da 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 da. Most all-round people will have 25% in every area, so they can maintain it, but they're not extraordinary in one area.
Yeah.
I feel we're just like 80% up into this one particular area, and then we've got to distribute it over to logic and everything as well. But that's why when we go the ego, before it'd be like, I've got to do this all myself. No, I've got to do it. I'm going to do it all myself. But I'm going to burn out. I'm going to crash. I'm going to go through all this. Now it's like putting the ego aside and going, look, I get you. I'm going to use you when I need to. But for now, I need to build a support team around me to be able to up that 20% to 40%.
Yeah.
It's that's the power of going, do you know what? I need freaking help.
I need help.
I need support. I'm not, and that doesn't mean I'm a freaking failure or I'm weak or I'm anything like that. Do you know what? And that took me a while to get over, going those labels of going, when I need help or I need to ask you to be able to help me with this thing, like that feels logic or feels something else that's just like, this doesn't connect with my brain. That is actually powerful, because if you can do that and I can then focus on my strengths, fuck me, I can then be really powerful. I'm not using up the CPU and stuff as well. It's almost like that's what I personally, I'm going down advocating neurodivergence and stuff as well. It's like, yes, we can sit in the bloody pool of the weaknesses and the struggles and stuff as well. But if you can get support, if you get something around you, or understanding coaches and therapists and stuff as well, to get an understanding around it and just ring fence it and just be able to build it up to allow you to sit over here, which is just like strengths and everything as well, you'll be able to focus more on that side.
Yeah.
It's just getting the confidence or whatever it is to be able to go, I can't do this on my own.
I think it's confidence, but I think it's more than that. It's humility. It's courage. It's courage.
Taking the mask down, stripping down all of it. Yeah.
Be honest with whoever those support workers are, to be able to understand. Sometimes I have new PA coming in, and as I'm beginning to explain to her what my needs are, I'm thinking I'm going to have to write this down, because I'm being swamped with words and I'm not coming across clearly because I want to say everything all at once. However, if I write this in a list or an email, I'm very erudite. Or if I can sit comfortably back, take some time to slow down and really come into the exact moment of what it is that I'm needing, and pull it back to just that thing that my friend says, the next 15 minutes. Okay, what's the number one thing? Let's just stay there for a bit, And
so my support worker did it in way voice notes. So I offloaded on a voice note, and then he picked out the parts that were relevant. He said, look, right, there's all the fluff. These are the golden nuggets that I've taken away. This is what we're going to do, John. I was like, fuck. That means I was able to go blah, 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 because I have to. Because sometimes even writing down, it's just like whatever it is, depending on when I've had the coffee. And he's neurodivergent as well, but he's able to see it disconnect all the emotions and see all the objective view. But it's taken us 8-9 months. But because the funding was from Access to Work, and I'm not, because if I had to come out of my own thing, I would have put pressure on return on investment. Like, oh no, I want to get this, because there's a middle ground and stuff as well, and there's the support. It's given us time to be able to figure out the relationship and the kinks and stuff, and for him to get to know me and the way I work and how I speak and how, because I also know, and I'm very truthful. It's one of those, I will annoy the fuck out of some others, and that's why you got to find the right person who's not necessarily had, like we talk about Tristan stuff, he hasn't just read a book and done a course about neurodiversity. It's a lived experience. That's why I want someone to have a lived experience of this every day, because you're not just going, oh, I can imagine how that feels. No. I don't want you to imagine. It's like, people who haven't had children, like, oh, I can imagine it is having children. I'm like, no, no, no. Until you're in it, you've had sleep, you've gone through all of it. So we're having two different conversations here.
Well, yeah, empathy and sympathy are two different things.
Well, exactly. And that lived experience on top of education and everything as well,
Yeah,
which is such a powerful combination.
yeah,
And for both of us, when we go and advocate, or we go and connect with other people about our missions and what we're trying to help,
yeah,
we are educating ourselves constantly at the same time, because we're not learning about a particular subject. There's a feedback loop
yeah,
coming all the time because we're living it. And I just think that constant awareness, education, and just surround yourself with that support team to allow myself to eventually, I'm like, oh, okay, I can start to feel the weight starting to drop off, and I'm starting to get a little bit lighter every single day, wherever it is and stuff. Yeah. And it's like I was saying to Tristan, I was like, oh, I'm not myself when everything's on top of me and I'm da 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 da. I'm more. He's like, no, no, no. You're yourself in all of those areas.
yeah,
If you add all the weights onto John, and then you compound him, this is how he's got. I call it the compressed donut. You squeeze the donut down, all the jam and shit comes out the sides and stuff. Verbally, whatever it is, impulsive, I'll start buying shit that I don't need, whatever it is. But you take all the weights off and it's like nice and fluffy, or whatever it is, light and weighted. That is also me. But I'm me in all of those areas. And I think it's an acceptance of, when we did the emotions game in Creative Recharge, like, there is an angry side of me, there is a sad side of me, there is a
yeah,
happy side of it. But and that's getting that support around me to be able to kind of feel less stressed, feel less anxious and stuff. You just feel like my work, my music is starting to get better, even though sometimes we have to delve into the well of, I don't know, sad times and stuff as well, to be able to kind of get the music and stuff. Sometimes we can get the music, but to be able to then do the other side of it, which is like release the music, perform and everything as well. We can't constantly be in the state of negativity and weighing down all the time. We have to
yeah,
feel like we can dive into that well. But I'm like, there's no wonder why some music artists, like the top 1% or whatever you want to call it, have got a massive team around them, because they can't do fucking everything. They have to do what they've got to do. But for a majority of us who are independent musicians, we have to do everything. So it's like, I burnt out too many times and now go, no more.
hang
I'm
on,
now getting
hang
back
on.
in.
I'm going to butt in there. Language, mind your language. We don't have
Well,
to do anything. We don't have
right.
to do everything ourselves as independent musicians. So let's remove that as a thing.
That's isn't that been the wow, that's what I thought. Maybe that's where I'm going with my life. That's who I thought I was before I found out that I didn't have to be that way. There was just this hardwired fixed, no, I have to do everything myself. I'm stubborn as fuck. I'm gonna just plow on, and basically it's strengthening a weakness that
Yeah,
just, I'm like, do I spend all my time strengthening my weaknesses? And I don't know if that's just language either, but watching my language, but or do I just allow that weakness as someone else's strength? I'm like, do I
yeah,
just offload it and then focus
yeah,
on the strengths? So yeah,
absolutely.
you're right. The watching the language, I think there is, I'm like, that's an awareness of how I used to be. Now it's just like, do you know what? I don't want to do that shit anymore. If I don't want to do that shit anymore, how do I offload my weaknesses and focus on the strengths? And that is, yeah, that's a constant mission. Do you feel that? Do you feel like if there's weaknesses, you want to offload them so you can focus on your strengths, or do
Yeah.
you have tenacity to focus on and build up your weaknesses?
I am where I am right now, which is this wonderful support team that I have around me. Again, access to work
Brilliant. Yeah.
and people that I've met through Creative Recharge and the coaching, transformational coaching journey that I'm on, and the mindfulness journey that I've been on, and the 12-step programs that I've been in for a very long time. all feed into this constant reawakening. Every morning is a new day, a new dawn, to quote Nina, bless her. It's just the perfect, the perfect way of being. Listening skills, really important. Getting to that quiet nub, that absolute central reservation place to listen from, is a skill that I'm honing and loving. As musicians, I think it's a place when we play and perform, we can get to that listening space within that environment. Taking that listening space into other environments is also a big part of the skill. I hear you about the another ADHD. Music and superpower and absolute devastation is being able to hear everything really clearly and all the time, all at once. So walking into a room full of people, especially where there's glass or a supermarket, or the overwhelm of doing a shop, the overwhelm of being in a cafe for a cup of coffee, and I'm just sat squinting, trying to hear what the person this far away from me is saying. And all I can hear are conversations happening at the far side of the room with absolute clarity. And it's that 360 eye thing, but it's a 360 oral, or perception. I can hear everything going on. I can hear tones in voices that are over there, of joy, of distress, of need, of excitement, of the emotion in the tones. Another superpower. Really tuning into that listening is a marvelous thing. Makes me a great singer because I can find those tones and be emotionally evocative. But do you know, one of the things I've recently found, there's learning to put some kind of distance between my expression when I'm singing dark songs and moving into an actor persona when I'm singing those songs, so that they're not me. I am creating this song as someone who is sad, not I have to be sad to create this song.
Amazing.
And which is a massive difference. Then I don't have to own, like all of the gorgeous people, like the Amy Winehouses and the Kurt Cobains, that have lived in that dark, constant telling your subconscious how black everything is, literally, in Amy's case, led to death. Now, I nearly ended up in that place, and I'm not doing that anymore. So there's this whole brilliant new learning, and perhaps musical theatre, or getting more into writing songs that are in that theatrical space where you're clearly acting rather than being the blues. You can act the dark side. Nick Cave's another brilliant example of conversations, around, and Sia, who also is, that masking, that removal from the mask, that separation between the identification with the emotion in the expression. So I'm not making or singing really much music at the moment. I've got an afternoon today of a producer friend of mine coming round to sift through archives of music that hasn't been released to release. So my focus is more on clearing the dam, getting the rocks out of the flow, so the flow can happen. And what comes next, who fucking knows? It's like, it will come for definite. But if I don't clear the dam, then this backup of like, oh God, this tension that I'm feeling because it's not being let out properly. I'm not letting go. It's a real restrictive feeling. And I'm excited to be pulling those rocks out and letting this dam, this flow, this river flow much more freely, and let it flow the way it wants to flow, because it will. And trusting that as well. And that act of trust, rather than, oh, I'm going to put this roadblock, I'm going to put this boulder here and direct the flow there. It's the opposite. It's like, remove all the boulders, let the flow happen, sit in the middle of the flow. I suppose it's some kind of, for want of a better word, it's letting the universe lead you, or God consciousness, or Buddha mind. There's lots of different ways of being in that space, isn't there? And that's, just looking at how waiting, being more patient with trust. Trust is something I've struggled with also.
But isn't it all this process we're going through at the moment? I feel like it's learning an instrument again, like the mind, like just picking it out and stuff as well. And you imagine how, like, the process of it, and because they used to be forced, you have to, you can learn it this way and things as well. But you get into then the point where it's just like, I'm still learning an instrument. It's still flowing, whatever it is and stuff. I don't force it anymore. Which is the same with singing. You kind of get to a point where like there's this effortless nature of it and things. And I feel this is what's unraveling now. There's this like the typical hurdles you go through when you're trying, like when we're trying to learn guitar, and it's just like, this is all awkward. I can't play this and stuff as well. But it gets to a point where there is an effortless sort of feeling about it, and it's probably the same with all instruments. And I know we're singing and stuff, but it's interesting to know with the awareness, and like there's awareness, but there's taking action on some of the awareness or and the education and stuff as well, and utilizing it of like, well, that's fine, all of that, but how do I sink this into my life? Do I force it? No, I used to do that all the time. I used to try and force the narrative or force what was going on in my business. Or do you allow it to just flow, go down the river? If it hits a dam, that's just a mini hurdle. We've got the resilience to be able to get through it or figure it out, creatively work around the problems. But and then all you step back and you go, actually, it's stopped for a reason. Why is it stopped? And but I think that is like to be able to go and then go, oh no, shit, something's happened. It's not quite right and everything as well. And no, this is just part of what's happening right here, right now. It's all happening for a reason. It's just such a powerful process to be able to go through if you can see it that way. But you link it back to music. It's just not linear. Or like when you're songwriting, when you're creating and things as well, it's just like I don't go into, I'm just about to release the 6th album, but none of that, it didn't form an album. It just like I went to it for guitar therapy. I went to my guitar to tell me how I was feeling. This is what came out, and then all the other shit started to flow. And I think if we can approach life in that sort of way, where it's just like, look, I'm just going to allow things to just unfold the way I unfold, and it could become an album in whatever context it is in our lives and stuff as well. But if you go into it thinking you're going to create an album, that's when we can shoot ourselves in the foot. We put deadlines, we put hurdles, we go, oh, it's not good enough, that's not album material, and then we get ourselves in our own way. Whereas it slowly manifests into whatever it's like a book, isn't it? Like you've just, if you go into it going, right, this book's going to be, there's a rigid sort of feeling. You start to feel excited, but then you're constrained by this thing that's taken over.
By the outcome, by a focus on the outcome rather than the present moment of the creation.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And if we call them destinations all the time, then we're just not living, are we? So cool. So to ground it, I mean, I always sort of end these things with, I don't know, a recommendation for, and we kind of alluded to lots of things about support stuff and lots of things for neurodivergent musicians, maybe who have recently been diagnosed or going into this journey or listening to this podcast, and wondering if you had advice or recommendation or a resource or we all need a Tristan Hunt, but there's that as well. But
I mean, get involved in the wider conversation. Be willing to know that you are not your brain as well. That disidentity, it's not your identity. There's a lifting the lid on the shame of it and the self-worth, the masks. Go steady, go easy with yourself. If you've had a recent diagnosis, it can be a tricky walk back to reclaiming the diamond that's underneath all of the masking. It can be a tricky journey, that one. Get some support with that journey. Get involved in a wider conversation. Contact me and John. We've been there, we've been through it. I've come out the other side shining brighter than ever in my life. Feel like, shinier diamond than I've ever been, and it's amazing. Read about it. There's Attitude, I find, which is an American organization you sign up for, weekly emails, and they recommend so many books, and
it's great.
It changed my life. I still, every week, I collect and collate and learn something from them. I'm hoping to do some writing for them, actually, about late diagnosis women with ADHD. So I'm going to do some piece of work for them. Keep talking about it, stay open. And avoid having conversations with people who want to shut you down about it. I've had people in my life, "Oh, what do you mean it's so ridiculous? Blah, 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 blah. What do they know? Da, 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 da."
Mm, mm.
Okay, it's not my job to persuade you about anything, so I'm just gonna not talk about that with you. Let's talk about something else, and then move on to someone who will allow that conversation to be open. Don't waste your time persuading people to accept you as you are or believe something that you are in the process of discovering. Fuck that. Don't do that. It's
Been
terrible.
there.
It shuts you
Yeah.
down, like knocking your head against a bloody wall. No head banging walls of conversations. You know, it's that go with the path of least resistance. Go with the flow. If somebody's not willing, next. And and keep going. That's the resilience. You don't know where you are, where you're from. You might be in a very, I don't know, tensely cloistered, working in an office that you've hated for a millennia and wondering why you're full of anxiety and depression and rocking and smiling as if everything's okay. If you're that person, then please reach out because we get it. It's yeah, there are safe spaces for you. Trust that and trust that
Definitely.
you are brilliant. There's a wonderful you. Always, there's always a wonderful you because the self-esteem knocks can be huge as well.
Mm. And discovering that, like, obviously we can read about it, we can we can watch videos, we can do the podcast and things as well, but that introspection, that kind of detective work that you do internally, like you're saying, like you'll get the diagnosis and we'll go, oh, it's be very fresh and be very raw and things as well, and you might not be ready for the detective work yet because you're getting over the initial shock of shit, how many years has this been under the radar and stuff. But that detective work, it's unique to everybody because we've obviously
Yeah.
all got our own backgrounds. But the other thing, what I love also what you're saying about conversations with other people, I actually started writing a song called The Response, which was looking at, I've just kind of throw it out there, and I was intrigued of like, what's the response from all the different people? Rather than seeing it emotionally, I went into an objective going, I wonder what your response would be, and clocking what you've just said. Oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, you've got resistance. This is resistance up to like 10 here. I'm like, do you know what? You've done me a favor. Actually, you've done me a favor for the future. I'm just not going to talk to you about this. Well, I'll talk to you about this. That's fine. Like you just said. But that for every one of those, there's, I don't know, there's heaps of other people that are out there that you can talk to. There's the internet now, which, you get yourself into the right groups, the right people and things as well. And I think that's what we're trying to do. Just build that support network where you can kind of openly be yourself and not feel like this is just you're on your own, because there's so many of us who are going through it as well. So
Yeah.
it's powerful.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sarah. It's
Thanks,
been an
John.
amazing chat.
Been lovely.
It has been. So
What a way to start the day.
yeah, I wish you well. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to hear more episodes, head to your favorite podcast app or platform and search for The Neurodivergent Musician. There are lots of solo and guest episodes to dive in with insights, improvised babble, and recommendations. I also encourage you to go and check out my new album, Neurodivergent, which is how I process my whole experience from unaware to aware, from undiagnosed to diagnosed, and more through music. And finally, if you are a neurodivergent musician and looking for a community where you can unmask and be you, please do come and join in. We deliver free workshops with Q&As and more. All links are in the podcast description, or you can find out more info at johnhartmusic.com or theneuroDivergentMusician.co.uk. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers. Take care.